Let me introduce myself first. I am Debojit Saha, and I'm Managing Director of Kaizen CRS. It's a research and consulting firm, and we provide uh, strategic consulting services to development agencies as well as corporate houses. And Fahim, if you introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Fahim Uddin. I'm the founder and managing director of Garbageman Limited. We are a recycling startup.
Hi, Silvia, can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I
Oh,
was on
great.
mute. Sorry.
So, would you
I
like to
can hear you
introduce
well.
yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Silvia Vaan, calling in from Amsterdam. I'm the founder of SweepSmart, and we are a Dutch-Indian company in the area of waste management.
Very good. So it's an interesting topic, waste management in urban areas. So my first question to the panel is like, what interested you to get into something like waste management? Because waste management is one of the areas which is not that glamorous, and a lot of people don't get into it. So what intrigued you guys to actually get into it? So Fahim, if you start.
Um, see, I'm an architect by training, so I studied about cities, buildings, aesthetics of the buildings, functionality of the buildings. Uh, Waste management is a component of the urban planning and urban development, right? So when I finished my undergrad, I went to practice. And when I started practicing in the building design, I could barely find any acknowledgement of that waste management practice, right? In Dhaka, everything is put in a bin. It's placed in a corner of our house, in the parking or backyard, right? We don't have a backyard, but in the let's say guard rooms or places like that. So the question was, how do we incorporate these waste management into our building design?
Right.
And from that, I couldn't see that I can really do something about it as an architect in that process. So that's how I started my questions to myself, like what can be the way. And see, in Dhaka there are like a lot of urban problems, traffic jam, this and that, sound pollution. So the one that I thought I can use my skills was waste management, because I'm like the designs, the communication, the technological part. It was my interest there. So
Right.
that's how I started.
Interesting. So, Sylvia, would you like to share your experience how you got into this whole waste management?
Yes, of course. So I'm an engineering background, and I've traveled to quite some upcoming economies also during my studies already. I always wanted to create an impact in terms of environment and people. I have the idea. I hear a bit of an echo. Is that correct? I hear myself double.
It's fine.
Let me check.
No, it's
Wait,
okay.
1 second. Sorry. No. Okay, never mind. It's fine. So I always wanted to do something that would make the world a little bit of a better place. And then after my studies, I first worked as a strategy consultant for Boston Consulting Group. And for me, that was really a way to learn a lot and to then take this into the impact space. I chose within BCG not to do an MBA, but a social secondment for a social startup at that time as well, that were making biogas systems for farmers in East Africa. And then that brought me to India, because I did their market strategy for India. And that's when I visited a landfill. So one of those waste mountains where there's also waste pickers working and living on top of that.
Right.
And that was for me the moment where I thought, wow, how can this still exist?
Right.
And I had a friend who was working in the waste management space, and we decided to do this together. He has the experience from the sector.
Interesting. So very interesting set of journeys which we heard about. This next question is like, when you guys were starting, so what were the challenges you guys faced as an entrepreneur? Like, what were the initial barriers, or what were the initial frictions which you had to go through, both social as well as in terms of business? If you guys can highlight those areas so that other entrepreneurs can also learn. So Fahim, if you
I would like to hear from Silvia first.
okay, so Sylvia.
Okay. Yeah, I think one main barrier that we faced, I would say, of course, is that waste management is a job of municipalities. And then, first of all, having to go to a completely new country to do business there in India, and then also having to work with governments there. It was tough, and it's still tough, I have to say. But we managed to do it, and maybe it's also good that we did not know how difficult it would be. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done it. So, I can give you one small example. After we did a really successful pilot in Bangalore, the municipality got very enthusiastic. They said, "We want you to start. We want you to do 10 more centers, and we want you to start next month." Well, that took 2 years to close the contract, and another half year to get the first invoice paid. So yeah, that's really challenging, but it's also fun in a way to experience. It's been a journey.
Interesting. So a follow-up question for you. So since you went to other countries trying to implement your ideas, did you face any cultural differences between your home country and where you were actually going to implement that project?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think there are huge cultural differences between the Netherlands and India, but also, of course, then with Indonesia and Ghana. So the culture,
Like how they were
yeah, I think
organized?
in Europe everything is very organized, and
Right.
that's often in upcoming economies not as much yet. And then between these countries, there are also very big differences.
Right.
So it's something you have to be very open to learn and to understand what the culture is like.
Right. So Fahim, if
Right.
you would like to share your.
So I would like to pick that word, organized. So I'm in a setup or in a context where it's very hard to say things are organized, right? So when I started my business, initially the challenge was mindset,
Okay.
like how people perceive that, I'm working with waste management, I'm working with waste. Management was a later word. The word was
Right.
waste.
Right.
That you were working with waste. So that was like a shocker for everyone. But that was a cultural thing, educational thing. But I would say I have came a bit far from that. My family, my friends, they are already aligned with the idea that yes, there is something there.
Right.
But the main challenge is in the policy, in the real world, where you have to get things done. So when I went for getting a trade license, right, they asked me, what type of business are you in for the trade license?
Right.
And in our system, there is nothing for the waste management.
Right.
Like we call them bhangariola, the recyclers, the informal sector.
Right.
They barely have a trade license. So if you really want to start something formally in regards of waste management, there's a lot of challenges. So for, let's say, the company incorporation, trade license, tax, and everything, we had a pretty long journey in terms of getting the papers, the due diligence, and everything. That was like the policy level thing. But apart from that, in the community, of course, our day-to-day operations, our waste, even the collectors, we have a lot of challenges there. But when I was starting, the main challenge that I faced was from my peers, that it was a shocker to them, and of course with the initial paperwork.
So what was the conversation like with your parents? Like when they thought that they are actually having an architect coming out of the university, but as you said, a Bhangari wala came out of the university. So what was the conversation like?
Well, it was. See, I go back to that all the time, but that's something I don't want to go back anymore because we have passed that through. So no, it was. I don't blame them because they come from a different setting. They had a different exposure about life and culture. So now this problem, like we are trying to solve a problem, as Silvia said, which is should be done from the municipality, or should be done from other government entities. But as a private sector, trying to tackle a problem which is like on a different magnitude, and I'm a very small pawn on the game. So the complexity of the problem is huge. And then the stakeholders involved in this are a lot of other people who are way stronger or way complex than you are.
Right.
So yeah, it was from them. They were like scared because a fresh graduate trying to do something else without being in the job he was supposed to. So yeah, I guess all these entrepreneurs, they start with this struggle. So it was fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Can
actually,
I briefly
yeah.
add to that?
No,
One
please go ahead.
comment? I really liked what you're saying about so many stakeholders involved. So the waste management, it's really a systemic issue. It's a system that needs to be in place. So it's not one thing that needs to fall into place. You need to have policy, you need to have the business case, you need to have the right companies to manage it. And the sector is still quite immature or nascent, I would say, and therefore also a bit underfunded. So I think those are also really challenges that we face. That it takes time for this sector to develop, and then become like a real economic opportunity for companies in it.
Yeah, exactly. So why I was asking this question about the peers and initial friction is because in a study has shown that more than 50% of the youngsters don't take entrepreneurship because they don't get support from the peers. It's mainly the mental support, which Fahim was discussing and Silvia was discussing. So having been able to successfully go past that particular barrier is something which we all can learn and take lessons from. So my next question to the panel would be, so what was the first, like what is the current status of the projects which you are actually doing right now? And if you could shed some light, like what is the current scenario and where do you see the future? So fine, would you like to go first?
So we started, so if I go back like 2 years or three, so we started from households. We started from 12 households, giving them buckets to teach them how to separate their waste, organic, inorganic, basically green bucket and a yellow bucket.
Right.
From there, we pivoted because household was, for me, with the small, limited resources, was bit complex. The awareness, the operations, everything was a bit complex. So we did a prototype on involving the households. Then we moved on into commercial kitchens, restaurant, tea stalls, these sort of places, because they have more understanding of segregation and they need a collection day to day. So they were more there. So then we now if I after successfully running the prototypes, now we are working with 4 components. One is our subscription-based collection service that is for organizations, restaurants, these sort of places. So we are collecting from big factories their kitchen waste, and we are converting those waste, the organic waste, into fertilizer. So that is our product, Regen Vermicompost. That is our product. We sell it to urban gardeners, rooftop gardeners, this sort of people. And the third component would be the recycling platform. So since we are not going to the household regularly, so we did not want to let go of that part as well. Because right now, if we look at the consumption, we all are consuming plastic, paper, this sort of recyclables. And it's an informal sector. So our company envisions to formalize this part as well. So we are working with the recyclable collectors, and we are working on an app. So right now the app is in a beta version, but we are using our online platforms to go for collection drive. We are collecting from houses, basically recyclables, paper, plastic, glass, aluminum cans, and this sort of recyclable things. And we are aggregating and supplying it to compliant recyclers. So we don't want to sell it to Islamabad where there is no compliance, there is child labor and this sort of thing. So we are supplying these items, the materials, to compliant buyers who are committed towards these environmental aspects, social aspects, these sort of things. And the fourth is our zero waste consultancy. So we are providing consultancy services to different organizations to reduce their waste, to reduce their carbon footprint. We are working with WFP and ICCO Corporation on a project in Rohingya camp, where we are helping them, providing them technical support, innovation support, to upcycle their packaging waste, food packaging waste, into different usable products. We are working with the Rohingya beneficiaries. We are basically, it's a human-centered design approach where we are trying to engage them in the design process so that the products that we make doesn't become a waste just like that.
Got
So
it.
there is a understanding of the product development, that sort of thing. So these are the 4 components we are working on. And personally, I'm working with UNDP as an individual consultant to build up capacity for the scrap dealer and make them more compliant in terms of safe work environment, gender balance, no child labor, these sort of things, and get them a marketplace.
Interesting. So from your discussion, I can see that there is a lot of unstructured, like the market is quite unstructured, and you're trying to bring a structure to the market.
Yeah.
So just a follow-up question. You first said that you first tried with the household level collections. So do you see that there is actually a gap in awareness or behavior? So do you need to see that there should be a behavioral change, sort of awareness should be there? Like, what is your
Of
take on
course.
that? Yeah.
So for me, waste management is not a technical problem. It's more cultural problem.
Right.
It's more behavioral change problem, because composting has been in our history for a long time. Plastic recycling, we can see there are technologies are available.
Right.
But how we incorporate, adapt to those technology, that is the challenge. So for me, communication, behavioral change, they are the key component for this sector.
Got it.
Like how we communicate with people and convey that this waste has a value. This waste is not just a waste.
Right.
If we look at it in a different way, we can convert that into a different aspect.
Resource. Got it.
And first of all, I would like to say, there are a lot of R's: reduce, recycle, refuse. A lot of R's. So for us as consumers, that is the first question: what we are going to buy. Are we going to buy plastics and then talk about recycling and waste management? Or at the first stage, we try to say, no, I don't need plastics. I have enough plastics. So behavioral change is the game, because, reducing volume should be the high priority rather than, having 5 companies to recycle.
Got it.
How we reduce the waste, that would be the main thing.
Interesting. So Silvia, would you like to share like your current status of your company, what is it that you are doing, and what is your future plans?
Yes, absolutely. And it's really nice to hear your story, because that's one of the reasons why we started the business. Because the first time we went to India, we felt there was such a great opportunity to kind of close the gap between the ambitions that were there from municipalities, other governments, and also the citizens that I do think want change in many places, maybe not everywhere, but in India you see it. And at the same time, local initiatives like your own that are, and it's more than an initiative, it's a professional company, but that are really trying to build something at scale. And we try to work with the two, the governments and the local organizations, to help the sector grow and scale and become more efficient and become more working according to quality, health, and safety standards. So I really like your story. And if you look at then where do we stand and what did we do? So we started with the pilot in 2016-17 with this thought of bringing the best of two worlds together, I would say. So I have in my team some very experienced people from the waste sector in Europe, and we want to bring the best practices from Europe, but then reinvent them or tailor them to the context in a country like India or Bangladesh. And that's where we started in India with 3 pilot facilities, which were waste sorting centers, where the waste pickers were sitting just on the floor between all the waste to sort the waste. And we have turned that into small factories with conveyor belts and a baler, efficient processes, and a dashboard, like you were also mentioning, I think, to see what the waste flows are and productivity, etc. Well, based on that model, we're now fast forward 5 years. We set up 11 centers in India. One of them is in Indonesia. We currently are setting up one in Ghana as well. So we're really growing our impact. And what's also very nice, I think, is that in some ways, I think India is a bit ahead of the pack in terms of entrepreneurship and in terms of different models that have been tried. And we now see that we can bring that to other upcoming economies, because our work is very scalable. Every situation, every city is a bit different. But there are so many similarities also across these countries that as long as you know what to pay attention to, you can design the right waste management system for that. So we're now really seeing how we see that across the globe, there's now more and more attention for the waste management topic, for ocean plastic pollution. So finally, I think that finally picking up. There is more funding coming available, and our ambition is really to build these zero waste ecosystems together with the local organizations, and there we provide turnkey services, everything from the waste management strategy until building the actual sorting centers, building or setting up the collection systems, etc., etc. So I feel that now is the time we're a bit ahead of the pack, I would say, and it feels to me there's really something happening, and this will kick off now. So I'm quite positive in that respect that we can work in quite a few different countries to help, kickstart this sector, I would say. Or not kickstart because it has already started, scale it up, basically.
Right. So interesting. So during the discussion, one thing came up is like government role, the role of government and policy has a big influence. So you guys mentioned that government has a very big role to play because they are supposed to like ensure that the waste is well managed. But despite all we can expect from the government, how do you think we can strengthen the government so that they can also understand the issues which are underlying and what steps could be taken? So, Fahim, if you like to, like regulatory body, how as an entrepreneur
So basically, government, what can government do is to develop policies and make sure that policies are there and it is implemented, right? And also to observe that things are in place and the quality of the commitment are being carried away, that is being done properly. That is government. But for me, I think for the circular approach, the manufacturers, the people who are producing, big brands, who are basically responsible for producing plastics using as their packaging materials, or the people who are responsible for producing waste in larger volume, they should take up responsibility, and government should try to tell them that this is also their responsibility, and this is not something that it's not just polluters pay. Government should also try to incorporate incentives for these manufacturers or the startups who are working to reduce or help this sector. So there are a lot of things government can support with subsidies or grants or in different form of incentives. But for the circular economy part, I would rather encourage the private sector, the manufacturers, to take up the responsibility and try to figure out how they can close the loop, and take care of their waste. And also the bring back policy, that is something we are missing in our country, in our context, that you bring in X amount of plastic or X amount of aluminum can, you get Y amount of incentive. So we are missing that sort of thing. So as Silvia was mentioning, that it is not just one organization, or this is not a one direction. There is multiple stakeholders involved. So if it's a holistic approach towards this idea, that towards the commitment that we are going to reduce the waste and help the environment to get better, then we need all these players to align the thought process and take up responsibilities. We cannot just pick point to government and say it's all your responsibility, or we cannot just say it's private sector responsibility. So everyone has a role to play in this.
Silvia, if you would like to share your thoughts on how private sector, like entrepreneurs like you, can strengthen government to actually solve this problem.
Yes, and I totally agree with what has been said. So we need regulation, but it's not just regulation. And I think from the municipality side, I think it's very important to have policies on collection fees. That's important. That households would actually pay some kind of fee for the waste to be collected. It's important to have something in place about source segregation, not littering, and actually how to enforce that. And I think EPR, extended producer's responsibility, which indeed puts the sector that produces all this waste responsible for the waste that they produce, so the plastics manufacturers and the brand owners. I think that will really help, and I see that as a big movement in the market already. So some countries are implementing this. Aside from the obliged EPR rules, I think a lot of brand owners and plastic manufacturers are voluntarily now taking ownership over the problem and looking at ways to fund waste infrastructure. So I think the movement is in the right direction. I think what is difficult for governments is that they also need examples, right? Because it cannot be done like it's done in Europe. There's really new models needed in these upcoming economies, and I think these models are coming up now. I think there are a lot of cities that they can take an example from. So I think that is very important, that they look at other cities that have already tackled this issue across the globe. And we help them as entrepreneurs in a way so that for example, we recently bid on a tender in Uganda, and we said, we're not going to tell you as Europeans how you need to do this as a city. We will try to get your peers on the table so that you can talk to the Indian cities that have already put progress in this respect, and the Indian organizations that are working with the informal sector, for example. So I think that is also very important. Also look at Europe for examples, but more importantly, look at other upcoming economies. And I think there's also a few great networks that are now starting to do these peer-to-peer cities. You have the Resilient Cities Network, you have UN Habitat Waste-Wise Cities, eClay. So I think there are also more and more international cooperation models now emerging in the field.
So the other question is like, do you think, to the panel, this question is like, do you think there's another sort of waste which is coming up, which is the e-waste, in this world of consumerism where we are actually like using and latest gadgets, and the life cycle of these gadgets are actually shortening up. So what do you think of the e-waste, and how do you think that this issue can be tackled? Because in urban waste management, e-waste has come up as one of the very crucial problems. So what is your take on this?
Well, same. The e-waste, it depends on the policy. Like the technology, as I said, technology is there. It's nothing we don't need to invent the wheel again. How we collect these e-waste, how we really convince the users not to throw it in the trash, the batteries, the keyboards, the mobile phone, these are the items that we should be looking at. And also, when I'm saying the technology is available, certain technologies, if you want to maintain the compliance, is expensive.
Right.
So then you have to have the government to
Subsidize,
help you. But the way it is done in our country, the small or whatever operations we have in terms of e-waste, there are certain compliance issues, because in the process of material recovery, there are certain risk of pollution and for the workers to get infected or that sort of thing. But if we go back to the collection of this e-waste, it's how we incentivize and how we communicate with people. So of course the volume is increasing, and we are moving towards digitalizations and everything. So household level to corporate level, this is the big challenge. So we need a policy. I think the government is already working in that, but the collection, the mindset, that is important.
So Silvia, do you think even in the developed countries, this problem is increasing? So what would you like to comment on that?
Yes. I have to say that we do not specialize in that respect, but I fully agree that this is a major issue. And what is interesting about e-waste is that some types of waste actually have quite high value, but some values have a negative value. So, for example, outside Bangalore, I saw this lake where people were dumping their CFL lights, big, big time. There was a whole lake full with e-waste. So I was very shocked when I saw that. So therefore, we need regulation here, because otherwise the ones that are more expensive to get rid of, they will end up in the environment. I think that's a big problem. And then, of course, in e-waste, there's also the challenge of the international flows of waste. So there's a lot of e-waste going from Europe towards Africa, for example, just being dumped there. And then ending up at landfills there with people obviously not working under the right circumstances to pull everything that has a value out of it. So this is terrible, and I think it also requires regulation in Europe to prevent that these kind of streams can just exit the continent like that. And there are, by the way, also some other very interesting company from the Netherlands that is doing kind of an offset mechanism, so that once you buy a phone in the Netherlands, they ensure that they also take one phone out of the system in Ghana, and that they ensure that that is recycled properly. So they're called closing the loop. It's really interesting. So yeah, big problem. I think regulation, and also there are entrepreneurial models to help solve it.
Interesting. So I have got two questions from the audience. So the first question is quite interesting. What can be the most effective way to encourage people against investing on plastic? So if you would like to comment on that, like what would be the most effective way to convince people to not invest on plastic, like for the private sector who are actually using plastic as a packaging tool and stuff?
See, why do people buy plastic? Because it's cheap,
Right.
right? So, because we are not considering the social cost, the environmental cost.
Right.
The moment you put in this environmental cost and social cost, it goes up. Increase the price of plastic. And then bring in alternatives like paper-based solutions or plant-based cutleries. These sort of alternative choices we have. Like we have been, in at least subcontinent, we have been practicing these sort of things: clay-based plates, pots, plant-based things. We have been using all these.
Right.
Then plastic came in, and then all these things was complex
Obsolete,
for
correct,
us,
yeah.
right? So if you really want to, you know, motivate people to shift from plastic, you have to regulate plastic and increase the price of it, and then provide them alternatives that there are alternatives of plastic. So that's how that's what I think we should be doing.
Sylvia, if you would like to comment on that, the question.
Yes. Again, fully agree. And I think another very important thing is the consumer, because I think the impact of the videos of the divers between plastic waste that went viral a few years ago, the impact of the cleanups, that you have the yearly cleanup day, and then they do a brand audit, and then the big names of the big brands are in this report, like, guys, you're still polluting the world. I think that impact is really big, and the companies are feeling the pressure to become more sustainable. So I think you, as a consumer, can actually do something, of course, in making the right choices yourself, using less plastic, using more sustainable packaging, but also in supporting these kind of movements. I would say I think they are doing a great job in putting the topic on the agenda. If you compare 4 years ago, if I would tell people I would do something with waste in India, they would all look at me like, why would you do that?
Right.
And now everyone says, oh yes, ocean plastic pollution is a big issue.
Right.
We need to do something about it. So it's really gone global also. I mean, for you, I think it always has been an issue in Bangladesh, but now here in Europe also understand what the issue is, and that they should do something about their consumption, and that they should choose the brands that are more conscious about it.
Interesting take on that. So yeah, the second question which we got from the audience, for those of us who are looking for ways to incorporate recycling into our lifestyles, how would you suggest we start? Like if people want to incorporate recycling in the lifestyle, so what would be your suggestion? How should they start? So Fahim, if you
See, you the context that we are in, even globally, it's really hard to go zero waste lifestyle. You cannot have it just like that, because we don't have alternative for everything right now in our place. So
Right.
this is increasing. So I would rather say, at least start. Don't wait to be perfect. Like, at least start somewhere. Start using reusable cups. Start buying less.
Right.
You don't need to indulge yourself in the buying process that we need more of these, more of that. So that desire of new things, that is something we need to look at the same time. And then there are toothbrush available made out of bamboo. There are homemade remedies to go for skincare, this sort of thing.
Right.
So if you really want to go for a zero waste lifestyle, there are multiple ways that you can start, and then you build up on it one by one. You
Right.
cannot have that 100% on day one.
True, true. Just to add on to that, the youth summit we are currently having or enjoying right now is having some active effort on trying to use as less plastic as possible, and we are using recyclable glasses, paper cups, and things like that. So I think this is a step forward towards the positive side. Silvia, if you'd like to comment on that, how people who are interested to go get into a lifestyle which reduces waste, how can they start?
Yeah, again, I think really start for yourself and see what you can do. I would also say be creative. As soon as you start thinking of every piece of material that you have as a resource, then you find also ways to use it. Huh? So we, for example, cook your food before it goes to waste, and then keep it in the fridge, and you can put it in a sauce later. I make. I actually have one here. I make plant pots from
Nice.
the tin cans.
Right.
Really come up with ideas how you can prevent waste, aside from, of course, the choices you can make and choosing different products. And I think what I like about India and Bangladesh, for example, is that you also have the choice as a consumer to choose a responsible waste management company, like I think Garbageman is.
Right.
So that's, in the Netherlands, it's more fixed. That is just a municipality comes and picks up your waste. But you can also make a choice there, and you can do home-based composting. So, and what I like is if you can show it to your friends, they also get inspired.
Right. Exactly.
So they also at a certain point start doing similar things. So yeah, start a movement, do whatever you can.
Right.
And start somewhere. I mean, I tell you cannot be perfect. We have so much plastic waste. It's frustrating, but it's just impossible to not use it.
Interesting. So my next question to the panel would be like, when you guys were starting, so how did you build a team? Like, I understand that you guys had the passion to actually solve the problem of waste management, but as Sylvia was saying, to inspire others, how did you inspire the team to actually work on the same with the same zeal and passion like you guys are doing? So
I would like to hear from Silvia first.
Okay, so Sylvia.
Well, I have to say that for us it was not such a challenge. All the people that we have now came to us. Okay. And I think that's very interesting because I also feel your tension in terms of waste management in a country like India or Bangladesh not being the most sexy topic to work on. I think here it's much less, I think. But I get so many emails from young, talented people that want to work for us. So I see a big difference. I think people are starting to say, I don't care what are the most, what used to be like the high status sectors. I want to do something to progress my country. And waste management is really important to do this. So for us, we were lucky. Maybe it also helps that we are a European company that might attract some talents. And I think so our motto is turning waste into happiness. And I think when we said that, when we came to India, people were a bit surprised, I think, by this tagline, because we really also lifted the informal workers who said, you guys are heroes, and ladies, of course. And I think nowadays the talent is attracted to mission and purpose. And we recently actually did a new mission vision statement, which puts it even more on the map. And yeah, I think the good people will come to you if you have the right message. Yeah.
Interesting.
At least
Fine.
we had the luck that that happens.
No, hopefully let's keep it that way. Yeah.
So for me, the team is still in a process.
Okay.
The team, see, there are two sides of it. Like one is the context of the ecosystem in our country, in terms of the startup scene,
Right.
and also it is kind of connected with the academia.
Right.
Then the mindset of the people to go for this entrepreneurship or going for a startup is probably not the first thing they want as their career,
Right.
right? So that is another one that to the first question is, do I really want to not go for a job that is conventional, but to go for a startup?
Right.
Right. That is the first struggle for me to get people on board. And then the other thing is aligning with the vision of the company. Like, do they really understand what we're doing?
Right.
Because I get it, it's a fancy name. You get a lot of attention for working for waste management where nobody's working or barely. There are like 3, 4 other organizations working. So there is a motivation for that. But if they really align with the idea of the mission vision of the company, that is something we are trying to build, because I cannot expect my teammate to be as motivated as I am, but I am also a founder for the first time, so I'm trying to understand the context and
Right.
the mindset as well. So for me, the team is a struggle, but it's the I understand the necessity of the team more now, because we are expanding our operations in different places, and we are trying to get people on board. People reaches out to us, they want to work, as volunteers or as part timers. So we are trying to expand the team according to that, and trying to hold on to the basically the ideology of the company.
Interesting. Yes, that's actually the team. We need the team to actually scale up our organization, and to actually have uh, like to see the same change which we want to see in our neighborhood across the whole country and across the globe. So only then we can see a sustainable impact. So I would like to go to some of the questions from the audience. So there's one question from the audience: will government collaborate with private organizations to work on waste management? So I think I would like to rephrase the question. Like, do you see government as one of the buyers of your services? What do you think?
Of course, there are like several examples of public-private partnership
Right.
in waste management sector. Um, though there are some questions about that, but still, the model is there.
Right.
The setup is there. Uh, if you have big investment, so there are two ways of going about it. Like, one is the top down and one is the bottom up. This sort of PPP are mostly right now, which is being practiced, is mostly top down. Like, they go for big investment, big machines, big site. But I see a lack in terms of the the bottom up, that, like small organization who are trying to bring in behavioral change,
Right.
or look into one particular waste stream, let's say paper recycling, or very focused on one stream of waste. They are not getting enough support. But to answer the question, yes, I see a lot of scope, and I would like to draw the attention of the audience on this, that when we are trying to say urban problems,
Right.
it's not just Dhaka we should be talking about, because all the other part of our country, they are growing as fast as Dhaka as well.
Right.
Dhaka is already a complex city,
Right.
but the new suburban places like Cox's Bazar, Chittagong, or even Pabna, Soyotpur, these are the growing economies now, and industries are going there. So even you can get a small wrap of M&M sort of things there as well. So
Right.
what happens there, we need to look at that as well. So there is a lot of scope of public-private partnership, not just in Dhaka, all over the country. But how you approach that, how willing the government will be, that is something we can discuss.
All right. So, Sylvia, what do you think of that? Like, uh, government as one of the buyers of your service, or like how private sector who are working on waste management can partner with government?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea for the private sector and the government to work together. I think a city has to make certain choices in how they want to organize their waste management, and you see that every city, well, some of them make similar choices, but they make, even in the Netherlands, every city has like a different model. Some of them collect the waste themselves. They have their own municipal company. Like I think, I don't know about Bangladesh, but you see that in India as well. And other ones completely outsource it. And
Right.
I would question whether it's a good idea that a municipality runs these kind of services. I mean, in a sense, you could say it's a public service, so why not? But on the other hand, cities are enormous, and they have. If I look at Bangalore and how fast Bangalore has grown and what they all need to manage,
Hmm.
it's just impossible. And then they would need to have a workforce of I don't know how many people to manage themselves. So why would you when you could get private companies to do it? So I think it's a smart model to outsource it.
Right.
And then, of course, it's a challenge. How do you regulate it in the right way? But I think there are enough examples on how it can be regulated. So I see tremendous potential there, also for organizations like Garbageman to grow. So I really hope that
Right.
you will be able to expand. Like I often I'm a bit frustrated. I think there's so many good local companies there. Come
Right.
on, why can we not
Exactly.
bring the two together? You know,
True.
to,
True.
to, to scale it all up more quickly.
Yeah, interesting. Because also, if a company is working on a particular issue, they have the expertise which the government can leverage to actually solve the problem. So
100%.
that is also something.
I would like to add
Absolutely.
on
True.
that as
True.
well. Like the components, like waste management, when we say waste management, collection,
Right.
transportation, secondary transportation, first sorting,
Right.
sponsor segregation, then collection,
Right.
transportation, secondary transfer, and then recovery. There are a lot of activities, and we cannot expect the government to do everything,
Right.
and also in an
Yeah.
efficient way, right?
Right.
So there are definitely a lot of scope for private sector to specialize on
Exactly.
one
Right.
particular component and help the government
Right.
as well. So yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. So also, what you were mentioning, it was also nice to hear from you that other cities are also expanding, especially in Bangladesh. I was actually also one part of one of the UNDP project where, due to the Rohingya influx, refugee, the number of waste collection that has increased tremendously, and there was a need for capacity development of the scrap dealers. And there are a few active projects which are trying to help these scrap dealers to
right.
actually develop the capacity on in that particular issue. So there is another thing which I would like to highlight is like tourist areas. There are like some seasonal effect. Like there are certain dry season where the tourists are not there, but there are certain seasonal. There are some times of the year when a lot of tourists go to those areas. So how can we actually embrace responsible tourism? Like we see a lot of waste in areas where there are tourist spots,
Yeah.
and because it's seasonal, the waste management is not up to the mark of what it should be. So how do you think we can actually embrace responsible tourism?
Since you, sorry, Silvia, I'm taking it. Yeah.
Okay.
So since you mentioned about Rohingya and Cox's Bazar, so we were on the same
Right.
project. So this influx of Rohingya, this was not seen,
Right.
and the magnitude of that place is
Huge.
beyond,
Yes.
right? And the amount of everything comes in a plastic there, like the soybean,
Right.
oil to
Right.
food to everything,
Right.
because that's how the donors are
Right.
giving them.
Right.
So that's a challenge there, and if we look at the case of Cox's Bazar, where I came back to Dhaka 2 days back from Cox's Bazar, and it was crazy the amount of people that I saw on the beach during this
Holiday season.
holiday
Yeah.
weeks. Uh, Crazy, and the littering on the beach. You see wrappers
Right.
all around, bottles all around. So that's again behavioral change. Um plastic, the amount of plastic. We are doing a survey in Cox's Bazar with UNDP to map like the scrap dealers, the amount of plastic they collect or how they collect, what is the supply chain, value chain there. So what is the existing capacity of that supply chain? We are trying to address that. But going back, the hotels, restaurants, the people who are responsible for even in the transportation, the buses, the ship that takes people to Saint Martin, they just dump the waste on the ocean directly.
Right.
So this is, uh, I don't want to call it tourism. I would rather want. This is not tourism. This is not something can be called tourism.
Right.
This is just
Exploiting the nature.
exploiting nature. Going there for 3 days.
Yeah.
Throwing your footprint all around and then coming back with some nice selfies. That's not tourism.
Yeah.
If you are going somewhere, try to learn about that place. What are the resources that are available, and what can be, even you can start from your personal items that you carry there. You can start from there, like all the things that you get, and also the things that available there should be on a high price. Like these sort of things should be on a high price. But as a matter of fact, that collection and everything, there is no such communication in those places. You will not see public communication focusing on these things, because education, we cannot expect people not to throw things when it became our kind of a behavior. So there should be regulation, punishment, and at the same time education, because you cannot find people without educating them that this is harming. There are certain conservation for turtles. There are certain conservation for other species,
Especially in Saint Martin's and
these things are happening. So how we really approach, and the tourism for our country should be limited, like limited as in there should be regulations to control that
number of visitors in the spot.
You cannot expect 5 million people in Cox's Bazar at the same time,
right,
and then expect it to be clean. So there has to be a regulation for that, and that's my take on that.
So Silvia, what do you think of it, like responsible tourism? Because I think it's also a global problem. I also have seen that in other parts of the world also, like where there are tourist spots, littering is there and waste management is not up to the mark.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. It's a big problem, and I think awareness is very important in that sense. I also think that often it's a bit about logistics. Like, if there's no bin to throw your waste, then how to throw your waste. And then, of course, if you're a good citizen, you will keep it in your pocket or in your bag somewhere. But at a certain point in time, people, how far do they need to carry their waste? And for me, for example, if I travel, I always bring a reusable bottle. But if you cannot refill it in the hotel, you need to buy a new one, right? So I think it's also about making sure that there's the opportunity to be a responsible tourist. That's created and it's made more easy. And it can be made fun. So yeah, on top of what, of course, you already all said, I think that's something to keep in mind as well. And also here, I do see that there is some change coming where people are attractive to eco resorts or eco hotels, or that it helps, or that it can be beneficial for certain target groups to profile yourself as like a green touristic destination or hotel. So I just really hope that movement will grow and that people will become more aware as a consumer, but also as a tourist.
Interesting. So there is another question. It's kind of a follow-up question from the audience. What do you think of the role of government when a brand which uses plastic in 90% of their products to set up business in the country? It could be. So what do you think that what can government do? So when a company or a brand which is using 90% of the plastic in 90% of the products, what can government do?
So the government already banned plastic like long back, like 5 years or 4. I don't remember exact date. But The law is there. The government has banned single-use plastic. But when we see our own government people giving COVID response items in plastic wrap bags, that's a double standard, right?
Right.
But of course, for the companies who are responsible for using 90% of the items plastic, of course, the government should enforce the law and see their progress. See, you cannot, the way we are working in the camps, that we are saying no child labor,
Right.
but the brutality of the situation is there will be child labor, despite of how many times you tell them that no child labor. So the decision is we say no child labor, but we are trying to advocate. We're trying to sit with them, talk with them. That what are the reason that there should be no child labor, and we're not telling them that from today you have to have go no child labor. You have to reduce. So there has to be a roadmap.
Got it.
Yeah? You
Right.
cannot expect all the companies to go plasticless from tomorrow.
Overnight, right.
There has to be a roadmap, 5 years plan, 10 years plan, but there has to be a plan and
Right.
implementation of that plan. We can ask the government to come up with something like that and have follow up of that.
Interesting. Sylvia, would like to comment on that question?
Yes, yes. I think we need to set standards and then apply them across the board. And I think it's difficult to then keep a new company from coming in. I think you need to treat all the companies in the same way and have regulation and enforce it. And there are a lot of different ways to do it. And I think it does help. So in India recently, a lot of the big brand owners got huge fines for collecting less plastic back than they were claiming they were doing. And yeah, again, I think this is changing the game. And so I think definitely the government in that respect can do things. Yes. Sorry.
Right. Interesting. So, when it comes to like, there's another question from the audience. Advice for people who are getting into this field. Like, suppose there's a new person who's starting his venture on waste management. So, what would be your advice to the young people who are trying to come up with their own ventures or ideas?
See, the first thing is to get your hands dirty.
Right.
You really need to go there because presentations are fine. They give you a certain guidelines. I have been doing that in the starting time. Like I did not start with the presentation. I had a prototype first. Then I went back and tried to go for the presentation to to convey the idea in a certain way. But if you really think that you want to work, you have to work in this sector. You have to have prototypes. That is the first thing that really you can convert plastic into oil. Make that happen. Invest in small prototypes. We have these resources available. We are in a time where everything is available on internet, YouTube. I self-taught myself about composting and the other aspect. So if you want, there are ways to acquire skills. So I would say prototype and persistence is another one. That there will be a lot of bumps on the road. People will not really understand what you are trying to say and what you are trying to build, but you have to be very persistent about making it done and happen. So yeah.
So the bottom line is get your hands dirty.
Of
So,
course.
Sylvia, what would be your advice to people or young people who are trying to start something on this waste management?
Yes. Well, I think first of all, learn, and Fahim was saying the same. And there's so much information really out there. Look at organizations like Garbageman, but there are so many examples that are now setting up successful business models in this sector. So look at what you can learn from all those front runners already. Aside from prototype, I think it's also important to think of how how you can make money. Yeah? You're a business, so how can you make money on the short term? And that might also mean, so for example, I think we have chosen a route that was not so easy. We wanted to solve the entire waste problem, or we really wanted to look at the first step, which is the collection and the sorting, and then work with governments.
Right.
That was not the easy path to choose, I can tell you, because working with government is a challenge, and then the business case of waste is actually most difficult at the first steps because the collection costs money. We chose that with a reason, also because we wanted to look at where the biggest problem was. But then also working with governments, I think was a bit of a too high. It was really difficult to get there. So also look at where can you start quickly, how can you earn some money, and then from there you can always expand to the areas that are more difficult. You think of your own capabilities. What are you good at to add to this sector?
Interesting.
Yeah, really think of why choose something that other people might be better to do than you. So what is it that you can bring to build the sector?
Right. So we have been talking a lot about the ecosystem and everything, but there is one important element in the whole ecosystem, which is the collectors, like people who have been working in this field for years after years and generations after generations, collecting waste most of the time without any safety gears. I have seen people working in very dirty conditions in unhealthy situations. So, what do you think could be done to actually help them, understand the need to use safety gears? And what was your experience from both the panelists? What was your experience of telling them to use safety gears and make them go through the whole behavioral change?
Yeah, it's so basically we started to basically we had a COVID response run for the waste collectors, waste pickers. So we supported 400 waste collectors in Dhaka, in different parts of Dhaka, Uttara, Gulshan, Bolani, and Tejka. We provided them PPE, which included a coverall, boots, gloves, mask, and some hygiene kits.
Right.
But the sad part, that for me, collecting donation and distributing the PPE was one of the
Easiest part.
one of the how do I put it, like the major thing that I have done in the COVID, like to help people. But I still consider that as a failure project for me.
Okay.
Because the coverall that I have provided was out of the context. It was made out of plastic, and they are working in a different context. They're heavy lifting. They're pulling the pedal van. They're putting up the drums. So without understanding, that was the quick response that we could. We gave them two part, like one for the upper and the trouser. So at least that was breathable, but still it was too heavy because in the summer sun, you cannot expect them to wear these sort of things and work. So that was one of the hiccup that I faced. Now that's another part where I see a good potential for research and development, to develop equipments, to develop shoes, to develop safety equipment for these sort of people, the people who are working there. We cannot expect them if we give them a gumboot, we cannot expect them to wear a gumboot and pull the van. So we need to look into the detail. So that was an eye opener for me when I went for the support. So we are trying to address that. Minus that, there is a really one mindset. As you know, that I have been working with the scrap dealers. We are trying to make an association there. So UNDP kind of helped to formalize one association, first ever in the history of Bangladesh in Teknaf and Ukhia. So they have association, scrap dealer association there. So they don't have any social acknowledgement. They're doing the most important job every day, taking your garbage and taking it somewhere. But they don't have any social acknowledgement. They don't have a uniform. They don't have an ID card.
Right.
So they feel really inferior to gel with the society. They have their own setup, but they really don't come out of that social shell and mix around. And their kids, their child, they are also having this mindset, and it's like a chain of they're not being able to get out of the chain. The child of that worker are also going to be a scrap dealer or a waste collector. So there is a problem with us, the way we see them, the way we address them. That's something we need to change.
Right.
And the, regarding the health and safety equipment, of course, we need to train them. We need to build up their capacity. We need to really tell them why during the COVID we tried to train them to use the health gears, because it was a necessity then, because it was harming them in a way.
Right.
So we tried to build up that capacity, understanding for them, and also for the other people like us, how we see them. So social acknowledgement is a must.
And it's an interesting point, because social acknowledgement, like there's always a stigma associated with while interacting with workers or with speakers, and there is a lot of I see that people don't look them as equal. So I think the social barrier and the stigma also hinders them to come out with the confidence that they can do something and achieve something in their life. And as he mentioned, it is also true that the children of these West speakers also feel demotivated, and that's what hinders them to actually achieve something great. So maybe we can change that status quo in the future. Silvia, what do you think of the West speakers? How they can be put into more structure?
Yeah, and it's been a challenge for us as well. That you provide over here, and that in the end it's not used, for example. I think it's definitely about awareness education. I also agree there should be better gear, but that's either more expensive, and I think also sometimes not designed for the heat conditions that you would have in a country like Bangladesh or India. So I support also the idea to do some R&D on it. I think another thing that I think might be part of challenge is that we can tell them to do to put on the shoes, for example, when they are in the waste center, and then not use their bare hands to sort the waste. But then they go home to the slum, where the situations are fairly similar as they would be if they are running through the waste or walking through the waste during their work. So I think for them it's also a different perspective in terms of what does my environment normally look like on an average day. So that's at least my take on it. That sometimes also plays a role. Like, why would I, if when I go home, I'm exposed to the same conditions anyway? Which is, of course, the whole problem in itself. I think the only thing we can do is build towards bringing the sector to a social status, higher social status, and to educate them and to give them the PPE. Also, I think the uniform, so that they look more towards the people where they collect the waste, that they are, that they are these great people that come and help you, and that will take time, I think. And it's also a challenge because if you also look at source segregation, ideally the waste collector would train the household how to do that.
Right.
But how do you do that if the waste collector is such a lower that they barely dare to say something about it? So I see that as a challenge as well, how to do that.
Yeah. True.
I would like to add something here.
Sure.
Like, in our context, the waste collectors are basically the ones, they don't get any job. They're not. They think they're not good enough for anything. So that's why they end up in this industry, either as a waste collector or a scrap dealer. But as a matter of fact, now that things are so complex with these, COVID situation or the harmful things that is in that bucket, right? There has to be some sort of training, and it's a profession, for God's sake. This is a profession. We need to see it that way. This is a profession, and there has to be certain criteria of getting people on board. Why, how, who, these sort of things has to be there. We cannot just employ one guy coming out of nowhere and ask him to go collect
Request, yes,
garbage for us.
Right.
That's what exactly happening
happening
now.
right now, right.
But we need to change that. This is a profession. We need to see it that way. We need to build up the capacity for the employees and also change our mindset.
Interesting. So we are almost at the very end of the discussion. So my last question to the panel is like, how do you imagine the world? What would be the like utopia for you? So your version of the world where you see waste management. How do you like to see that?
Sylvia first.
I think the difficult questions he just passes it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, of course, I go from kind of desperate to very hopeful sometimes, because the problem is still so huge. It's on climate change, it's on waste, it's on pollution. So I have my bad days and my good days, but I still tend to be. I really liked how someone once put it. I'm not an optimist, but I'm a possibilist. So I believe in possibilities, and I see so many good things going on that there is change happening. Citizens are not accepting status quo anymore. Governments are changing. There are so many local initiatives and great startups and other companies. They are also influencing bigger companies to move. The brand owners, definitely, the plastic producers see what they are doing is not okay and that they have to do something about it. So, yeah, in that respect, I do see a world where the industry makes sure that there are sustainable outputs. Now, as a consumer, you do not have a choice, a little bit, but not completely.
Right.
The government regulates that, and the consumers really care about living in balance with nature, and therefore make those choices, and therefore hold their governments responsible for making those choices. And I think it's possible, and I totally agree with Fahim. I think the technical solutions are already there. We need a few more pieces of the puzzle, but that's really, it's much more a social economic question, I think, than a technical question.
Interesting. So, Fahim, what would be your ideal world?
My ideal world. See, right now we are trying to address a lot of things. Like, I am in a transition. I'm going from urban place to a rural place to very touristic place and to the longest beach. I'm in a back and forth situation like that.
Right.
So for me, I would see, people are getting their these waste collectors. They're getting their basic things. That would be the first thing, and nature should win. Nature should win over anything. Our cities, our surroundings. I would like to see. I'm not against development,
Right.
but I would like to have nature part of that development, inclusive development along with nature. That would be something I would want to see.
Interesting. So, any last comment from Silvia? Like, what would, like, if you want to summarize about the waste management, about the work you're doing? Any last comment from your side?
And by the way, I think nature wins. I think is very important. There's big campaign as well where they had big actors, and one of them, Julia Roberts, I think, was like Mother Earth, and then
Right.
had another actor that was the ocean, and another actor was the forest or something, and it was all about, I'll be fine. It's your problem, humans. You're not going to destroy me. You're going to destroy
Of course.
part of me, but I will
Right.
survive.
Right.
You'll get the storms and the weather and I don't know what. That's such a fascinating perspective. That is the wake-up call, I think, that we need. And the question is, of course, how much do we destroy in the meantime? And that, of course, is very painful to see, how much we are destroying. Yeah, but sorry, so some final thoughts. Yes, I think, yeah, it's just interesting to see that I think there's also more and more collaboration coming. I think COVID has also presented us with an opportunity because the world has discovered online. Like 2 years ago, if I would request online meetings for people, they were all like, I don't know. And now it is a webinar and everyone's doing webinars and everything online. So I think it also opens up opportunities to collaborate on a global scale. So I think in that respect, let's keep exchanging ideas and building international collaborations as well to advance this sector.
Interesting.
And I hope that all the young people in the room with you and online, that they are, I see so much movement from the young people in that respect. Exactly. They don't want to work for the big oil companies anymore, but I understand their challenges for me, but I do think they more and more choose for another path. I see hope there.
Of course. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. True.
So, what was your ideal world?
So, closing remark, I would say we have one planet, one life. We need to really make ourselves useful. Serious things are complex, but we should be able to see. We need to enjoy life.
Right.
There is no harm on that.
Right.
But how we do that, that is the question. We really need to be responsible for the choices that we make, and take care of the nature surroundings as much as we can.
Right.
So, yeah.
Interesting. So of course, as we have been discussing, it was quite an interesting discussion. So there's only one planet, one life, and it is our duty to keep our Mother Earth safe, clean, and environmental friendly, so that we can enjoy the nature and also the development. So going back with the theme of the summit, like the pandemic has shown us that how important it is to actually respect the nature and to respect the environment and to figure out a solution where development and nature can coexist. And the pandemic has really been a very learning experience for us and the whole world. So hopefully there will be no going back to the earlier world where things were not as positive or the experience and the way we were like moving ahead with the development. So maybe we will pause that and think through and come up with a development plan which is sustainable both with nature and with technology and other things. So with that, I would like to conclude today's session, and a very thank you to everyone for joining us all over the world, and also to our panelists for giving us the valuable time and sharing the insights with us. I hope it will be learning experience for us as well as someone or other youngsters who are trying to work on this particular sector. So thank you, everyone. So hopefully we will have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.